Hi, my name is Kecia Larkin, Kecia Larkin. I'm from the Blackfoot and Kwakwaka'wakw nations of BC and Alberta, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about a friend of mine. In 1989, I was 18 years old and not very safe. I was living in the downtown east side of Vancouver and had been there for a number of years. And I was very vulnerable. I was not in a good place mentally, physically, or emotionally. And I had been involved in the sex trade from the age of 17 till the age of about 19, just around the time that I aged out of the ministry. And during that time, I knew a lot of young women who were in care and were being either lodged in single room occupancy hotels, basically shooting galleries, because there were, I guess they called them hard to house girls. And I was considered at risk, I guess is what they called me. And basically what that meant is I would leave my foster home or group home often because there wasn't anything there to keep me interested or feeling engaged as a young Aboriginal woman. And I was being placed in all these non-Aboriginal places that I just didn't feel like I fit. And I had already early on started experimenting and hanging out in the downtown east side. At that time, I met a number of young women and men who were in care like myself, and I became, I guess, street friends. You know, you have different pockets of people that do different things, and I was sort of on the fringes. I wasn't heavily involved in dope or anything, but I was definitely doing drugs. Anyways, my friend Sarah and I were connected through, I'll just say drug connections, and I started hanging out with her and her partner. Her partner was a very abusive male, not very stable and kind of scary, actually. I remember on many occasions Sarah and I being afraid, and I remember going to the hospital with her when she was sick and having a hard time. Anyway, Sarah was at one point settled down, and by this time I had moved on and become involved in school, trying to better myself, and definitely involved in community work. And by this time I was in my early 20s, so Sarah would have been in her early 20s as well. She definitely would have been aged out of the system like I was. And I remember the first time that I heard the recording on the television and the voice that was talking to the police, taunting them, saying that they made her squeal like a pig. And at this point, there had been a call out from Sarah's friend who wasn't involved in the downtown east side or that lifestyle, but was a big support for her. And he was the one that was calling out for her to be found. And it ended up being Sarah DeVry, or Sarah DeVry, depending on how you say her name, but Sarah Jean was her name, and she was my friend. And I remember her as a beautiful, vibrant young woman who was very strong, very just a vibrant soul for such a young person. And she was very streetwise, and she had already been very traumatized from her experiences, and she really helped me in many ways because I was newer to the streets, so I was sort of taken under her wing in a way. But that's my story about Sarah.
If someone were to go missing now, like in the case of Sarah, and what that friend was doing for her, what kind of advice would you have for folks in that situation?
Well, the first response that I think is one of the best responses is having a large family system and community that you can reach out to, and definitely looking into the processes that are laid out by not just the police but other agencies when it comes to murdered, or when it comes to somebody that goes missing. And generally people start with calling hospitals, calling emergency rooms, and generally if they call the police, often I've heard people have been told, oh, you need to wait 48 hours, and depending on the person that's missing, you're going to get a different response. So you really, I think, having approaching a group of people to support you and to make these important phone calls, to be able to gather together. If you need to make flyers that need to go out in the community, I know a lot of people are starting to use social media as well as a way to reach out in sometimes the first few hours. So I really think that I believe, like I said, I really encourage people in the first little while the most important thing is to remain calm and pull as much information as you can about that person. If you're worried about where they might be, or if they might be with somebody, start writing down as much information as you can. Whether you're going to go to the police and they come to you, you're going to have to provide very personal information about that person. They might ask you questions about that person's lifestyle. So it's important to be very honest about what or how that person is feeling and thinking, possibly what they might be doing. They might be depressed and need a few days away. They might be newly involved in the sex trade and perhaps a victim of a pimp. So there are a lot of different scenarios that we go through and you think about when you're first dealing with a person that's missing in those first few hours, or perhaps days after you realize that maybe they haven't shown up to their regular routine. And those are some of the things that I've learned from being around community who've dealt with other members that have gone missing or have been harmed or maybe at risk or might be dealing with a mental breakdown. Schizophrenia is often one that might happen, and I've seen people who've been lost in the community. So a family member might go to the police and work with the police who have information within the community agencies. So they might be working with, maybe here in Victoria, with one of the special court systems that deal with people who have mental health and need to be taking medications. So it's really important to find all the resources that are available. In Victoria, there are different organizations that are available, and I know that there is a national missing and murdered women's website and way to get information out there. And I'm not sure of their contact information, so I'll have to just pause there for a minute, Audrey.
Against all hope, the missing do end up being found murdered. Is there any advice that you have for families in terms of how to deal with the system while grieving?
I have, when I think about families who are dealing with the system while they have a missing loved one, a sister or an auntie or a grandmother, I know that the wait is probably the most difficult part, because most of the time people know that person's routine and are just kind of sitting there in limbo, almost in a state of shock and wondering whether this person's going to come home. I really think that it's important for families to find some type of support system, either through community. Definitely being able to gather together is something that makes a huge difference. I know in families, particularly like mine, when we have a loss or something that's touched our family, like a suicide, we'll come together as a family just so that we can be together. And these are the strengths that we have as Aboriginal people. And we have the answers in our communities. We have the ability to easily come together. And, you know, when times are tough, you know, that's when we ask and we reach out to our people, who often say, I'm there for you. And that's a time when it's important to really reach out and call on those people to come and just sit with you and be with you. And if not, then definitely they might know people who are willing to come and assist in any way they can, whether that's handing out flyers, whether that's a business that they might know. So I think networking, being able to find support in the community, and definitely having other people who are willing to step forward as leaders and speak to this issue in the community is very important. And it's not about taking away from what the family is experiencing. I think there are really good ways to bring out the issue of a loved one who is missing or has been found in a way that will touch another family and help them. So I really encourage people just to speak out as best that they can, and knowing that you're going to help another person that is in your position, and that's sharing your experience. I know that right now my heart is filled with a lot of gratitude to be able to stand here and just share a few moments with you. What I do know is that my heart does feel for all of our sisters and our aunties, our grandmothers, and our moms who have not been able to make it this far in life with us. I often ask that in my own prayers for all of the women who are missing, that they be found. I try and share as much information when I see somebody who is missing on social media. And I think that's really important to know that we might not be able to hug you, but just know that when there is a posting, we're out there sharing it. The community is out there, and we do care. We do love you, and our prayers are being lifted up with you. And I just like to say that when the time comes, I know that you'll get through this, and just be strong. Kecias.